Hello, and welcome to my repository.
Well, now we know where I got that from. Okay, let me get this out of the way. In terms of twists, House of Ashes is the best. The Devil in Me is okay, Man of Medan is passable, and Little Hope is hot garbage. But these are just my opinions, and if you disagree, that's perfectly fine. I will, however, ask that you hear me out as I provide my reasoning, since it might provide you with a new perspective. For those of you who don't know, the Dark Pictures Anthology is a series of interactive horror adventure games developed by Supermassive Games. Each installment offers a standalone story with a collection of playable characters and unique settings. And while all of the games have different threats and different plots, they all usually have some sort of twist. Now, I probably don't need to tell you why twists in stories are pretty hit or miss. There are plenty of videos out there that have already covered the risk of a bad twist and how it can ruin an otherwise compelling story. That topic's been done to death. And while there are plenty of good twists out there that recontextualize the narrative for a richer experience, there are plenty, if not more, that simply exist for shock value, or worse, recontextualize the plot in a way that undermines and tarnishes the entire thing. I'll be going through the 4 Dark Picture games chronologically, providing a quick plot summary for context and giving my take on their twist, and explaining the reasons for my judgment. Man of Medan was the first in the series, coming out in 2019. Set in the South Pacific, Man of Medan follows a group of young adults who discover the coordinates of a lost World War II ship in the wreckage of a sunken plane while on a diving expedition. They end up pissing off some pirates who seize their ship and find the coordinates the group just discovered, forcing them all to go there in the hopes they'll find a mysterious treasure called Manchurian gold. Upon boarding the large ship, the group runs into a lot of ghostly sights as they try to steal back a crucial piece of their ship and leave. Eventually, they learn of the twist, that the Manchurian gold isn't treasure but actually the name of a hallucinogen, and all of the paranormal stuff they've seen isn't real. It's the all in the main character's head trope. A lot of people hate it when stories do this and tend to see it as a cop-out, but I'd be hypocritical if I said it's a bad thing to write into a narrative. And I personally believe that this trope often gets a bad rap since most of the writers don't know how to effectively use it and end up invalidating large chunks of their own stories. But when it's used properly, this trope is honestly not that bad. And while Man of Medan's twist isn't exactly groundbreaking and quite bland, I also find it rather inoffensive. Man of Medan's hallucinations aren't the worst betrayal of the trope, because once you know about the hallucinogens, you're still left with the challenge of discerning what you're really witnessing. Let me explain. Most hallucination twists fall flat for me because the hallucinations A. don't provide a physical threat, thus causing the plot to lose all tension, and B. are easy to see through once you know it's a hallucination plot. And while a majority of the hallucinations in Man of Medan are nothing, and this irks me to no end, some of the best hallucinations are actually twisting or obscuring real threats, which technically takes care of point A. Now, you can learn about the hallucination plot about halfway through the game, which would normally damage the story since you, the player, know it's not real. You don't shoot the monster coming at you because you know it's probably nothing. Or if it isn't nothing, it's probably another character as the game tries to goad you into shooting your friend. The dilemma comes with the fact that you don't fully know who's behind the monster. Sure, it could be your friend and the game is trying to trick you, but what if the game is clever enough to double bluff? What if you don't shoot the monster assuming it's actually one of your friends, only to get killed by what was actually one of the pirates? Now you have to make a call. What's behind the illusion, friend or foe? Which, admittedly, is pretty much a coin toss since most clues in these games can be pretty misleading at times. But at least learning of the twist doesn't lessen the stakes. Oh, and let us not forget that even if you could see through every hallucination and accurately predict what the illusion is hiding, the NPCs can't. Just because you know something isn't real doesn't mean someone else does, and that other person is just as, if not more dangerous, than any illusion.
Okay. Okay. None of you move. None of you go all changing on me now. Turn around. Slow. Real slow. Oh. Okay. All right.
Take my favorite scene from the game, where a critically paranoid Junior holds Brad and Julia at gunpoint, convinced that the delusions brought on by the gas are real. It's easy to pick not to shoot the clearly fake monster in a game, but it's quite a tense scene when you're on the receiving end of the gun, and the choice isn't yours. Your actions are now monitored with crazed frenzy as you attempt to talk down a person with a rapidly devolving mental state. All in all, Man of Medan's twist is passable, much like the rest of the game. But you know what isn't passable? Little Hope. Little Hope was the second game in the series, having been released in 2020. And just like 2020, Little Hope was a miserable experience. Little Hope transports players to a small isolated town called Little Hope, where a group of people become stranded after a bus accident. Every attempt to leave is thwarted by a Silent Hill-type fog. As they explore the eerie town in search of their bus driver, they discover disturbing parallels between their experiences and the town's dark history, and must avoid the horrifying victims of the witch trials who have contorted into terrifying monsters. Pretty exciting, right? Well, it would be if any of it was real. That's right. It's the all in the main character's head twist again, as we learn that not only are none of the horrors real, but none of our characters are either. And we've been playing the bus driver the whole time. Now, I had just previously stated that I have nothing against the it's all in their head trope, but this is just atrocious. You're telling me that all of this has just been an old man's PTSD fever dream? I gave Man of Medan a pass since it was the first game, and its hallucinations didn't necessarily lessen the already okay game. But immediately following Man of Medan up with another it's not real twist? Why? This is an anthology. Why did you recycle the twist? What, are all 4 games going to be the same? I mean, it's thankfully not. And wait a minute, let me get this straight. So this whole time we've been playing as the bus driver, who is a much older Anthony, the only survivor of the cold open where the rest of his family dies in a fire. The characters we play as are reflections of our lost family members, and all the spooky stuff has just been mental hallucinations. Manifestations of his guilt, I guess? I don't know. But what I'm getting at is, why didn't he leave? The reason the player can't leave is a magic fog that turns us around, but we've just established that it's not real, so what's actually been stopping us? And what's with the witch trials? They have nothing to do with Anthony's family, so why are we seeing them? Is it because Anthony learned about the trials? I guess it makes sense that with his trauma all the victims would look like his family, but then what's up with the pastor? Why is he part of it? And hold on, if there's nothing supernatural, why did Megan burn down the house and kill her family? Did she also have mental problems? Then why do we see a demon? Also, all of our other characters are fake. They're just not real. They're representations of our lost family. Then why are they presented as a college class, with their own lives, backstories, and relations? I mean, it's not like all these hallucinations are a result of the crash, since Anthony talks to his fake passengers before the crash happens. And the crash itself is caused by a vision of Megan. And why are we supposed to care about these characters if none of them actually exist? What were they going for? I mean, who am I kidding? I know what they were going for. Eerie fog, a weirdly abandoned town, monsters and NPCs representative of past traumas and guilt. They were trying to pull a Silent Hill thing, weren't they? I'm sorry, but it just did not work. This twist is the worst, and Little Hope is a joke of a story. But I also don't enjoy being wholly negative, so I'll touch upon what I like about this game. For one, I adore druidic witchy folk horror, and a horror game that delves into the cruelty of the witch trials is a neat concept. I mean, cut out the college group plot and make the whole game a period piece horror about the witches, and this would be a stellar game. I also really like the monster designs, and how each one plays off of the way in which they were executed. These monsters are probably the best part of this game. It's a shame they aren't actually real. Little Hope was the bottom of the barrel. Thankfully, we can now move on to my personal favorite of the Dark Picture series, House of Ashes. House of Ashes was the third installment of the series and was released in 2021. Set during the Iraq War in 2003, House of Ashes follows a military unit that is trying to locate weapons and is suddenly attacked. Then an earthquake causes the ground to collapse. The group unwittingly stumbles upon an ancient Sumerian temple buried beneath the desert. The soldiers and their adversaries find themselves trapped underground with an ancient evil, and must try their best to put aside their differences as players navigate the treacherous tunnels and face off against supernatural creatures akin to cave-dwelling vampires. Eventually, the group comes across a large underground structure, one far older and more advanced than the temple. It's a crashed spaceship, revealing the twist that the monsters are actually aliens. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the best twist in any Dark Pictures game I have ever seen. It's a twist that doesn't invalidate or neglect the rest of the game up to this point, and rather simply answers what the monsters actually are. This game beautifully misdirects the player. The first time we see the monsters is in the cold open of the game, which is set in the temple's past. Most depictions of aliens set their technology far beyond our own, and usually puts them in space, which has us naturally associating aliens with the future. Introducing the monster in the midst of an ancient blood feud among all the talk of gods, demons, and repentance has tricked the player into assuming that the monster is some sort of divinity or infernal beast, a curse upon the Sumerian temple. This assumption is later reinforced when Salim finds a book of mythology in his son's bedroom. But as the game goes on and we get a better look at our monsters, we'll probably start to notice that they have a lot of bat-like features. Their pronounced front teeth, their wings, their lack of eyesight. Couple this with their violent reaction to sunlight, Salim killing them with a stake, and their reaction to blood, and our assumption of demons gets thoroughly replaced with the idea of vampires. Now, the Dark Picture games have sort of developed a reputation of having twists. It's kind of been established at this point, and so many players were probably expecting one. So when monsters that were initially presented as demons are then slowly showcased to be more like vampires, players probably figured that this was the twist. I mean, come on, some of the people they bit quite literally grow fangs. Pair this with the journal entries of an old expedition that sound like a monologue ripped straight from Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I think it's pretty safe to assume the twist is that they are vampires. And yet, once again, our perception is flipped on its head, as it is revealed they are in fact aliens. This twist doesn't tell us the monsters don't exist, or even change that much about how the monsters behave. In fact, they're the same threat they've always been, playing by the same rules. It's just we now know what they are. I absolutely adore this twist and think it's the best in the series. And besides, I adore the running motif of people setting aside their differences to survive. What can I say? I'm a sucker for the enemies to friends trope. But I do realize that this gives me some bias towards the game, and I will touch upon one of the few negative things I thought whilst playing the game. And that's the old expedition. You know, the one with Randolph that left behind all the gear and journal entries. Why aren't we them? I mean, not to compare this game to Little Hope, because House of Ashes is far beyond Little Hope, but why do these games keep introducing plots that we hear about in the past that sound like they'd be more interesting than the plot we're currently in? Don't get me wrong, I adore the plot of House of Ashes. Like I said, the character development between Jason and Salim brought me so many smiles. And they're probably my favorite characters in the game. But could you imagine a game where that cold open of an ancient war led into an archaeological expedition, in which members of the expedition slowly fall ill and what is perceived to be demons stalk the dark? Paranoia spreads among the group as more and more people debate and theorize about what the monsters could be, slowly pulling a thread of vampiric mystery. Tensions rise, friends turn on each other as they witness firsthand what someone bitten by these monsters becomes, arguing whether death would be a mercy or if a cure could be found, fending off what they perceive to be technologically inferior enemies with their guns and dynamite, before stumbling upon the earth-shattering discovery of alien life, learning that these creatures and their technology far supersedes our own. Doesn't that sound like an intriguing story? But I digress. House of Ashes is still the peak of the Dark Pictures Anthology. But since I've run out of things to talk about, let's move on to the final game. As of right now, The Devil in Me is the newest release in the series, having been published in 2022. The Devil in Me follows a small, struggling film group that is currently working on a documentary covering H.H. Holmes, a real-life serial killer who became notorious for a hotel he built that allegedly contained all sorts of traps and tricks to aid in his killings. The group is contacted by a mysterious benefactor named Grantham Dumet, who offers them a place to shoot on his secluded private island. They arrive, and it isn't long before Mr. Dumet starts hunting them down, his building full of traps and tricks like H.H. Holmes before him. Throughout the game, you can find these tape recordings of one Agent Hector Monday interrogating a serial killer named Mandy Sherman. The twist of this game being that the killer hunting you, Mr. Grantham Dumet, is actually FBI Agent Hector Monday. And honestly, that's pretty much it. I mean, it's not a bad twist like Man of Medan or Little Hope, but it doesn't really stand out in the way that House of Ashes did. All the previous twists have been really big and upfront, whereas this one feels a bit more, I don't know, in the background? Which isn't a bad thing, but it just isn't really noteworthy? I mean, nothing about your predicament or your enemy really changes after you learn about this twist. And I know I said this was a good thing when I was talking about the twist in House of Ashes, but that's different because while the enemy stayed the same in House of Ashes, your perception of them changed. In House of Ashes, you spend the whole game assuming the monsters you're fighting are demons or vampires, only for the ending to reveal they are actually infected aliens, which is why stuff like the cross didn't work on them. But in The Devil in Me, you're hunted by a man in a mask who stalks you throughout a house full of saw-like traps. Then, after the reveal that it's Agent Monday, you're hunted by a man in a mask who stalks you through a house full of saw-like traps. Nothing really changes, and the perception of your killer generally stays the same. All we really get out of the twist is a bit more backstory on the killer and a look at his motive for killing, which again isn't bad. I much prefer this subdued twist to one where he's, I don't know, a figment of the film crew's imagination. Revealing the name of the killer is an okay twist. It's better than most, but it's just not something I can comment too much on. The characters and the location are nice. It really feels like they all knew each other and were real people. And the location was big, but not so overwhelmingly big that you didn't know where you were at any given point. I think that's it. Like I said, it's an okay twist, there's just not much to say on it. Which I guess brings my analysis to a close, as we've now covered all 4 twists of the currently out Dark Picture games. Now, all analysis and critique aside, I will admit that these games hold a special place in my heart. Even you, Little Hope, you wretched little misstep of a game. I adored playing these games with my friends. Movie night mode is definitely the way to go. And while their plots are dramatic, their styles highly cinematized, and their twists often tropey, I can't help but enjoy the cheesy nature of these games. Their settings and monsters are often fantastic and usually play off of well-established horror concepts. Suffice to say, these games wouldn't be the same without their crazy twists. And I look forward to whatever insane twist is presented in their next game, Directive 8020. Here's hoping it's not a hallucination caused by, I don't know, space madness or something.